Organize and place all packages in front of the desired wall space. Measure the wall space so you can accurately place the plywood in the middle point on the wall. Measure the width of your plywood. It should read 93 inches tall by 43 inches wide. Once the plywood width is established, use a pen, pencil, or tape to mark the plywood endpoints onto your wall. There are two options for setting the height of your system. If installed directly on the floor, then the panels will need to be 92 inches high. If installed sitting on or just above the baseboards, then the panels will be roughly 96 inches high. If participants are generally under 5 foot 8 inches, then we recommend placing the systems directly on the floor. If the participant's height varies above 5 foot 8 inches, then we recommend placing the systems 3 to 4 inches above the floor. The wall space being used must be clear of all obstacles to ensure that the plywood backing can mount flush on the wall. The correct mounting of the plywood sheets will determine the success of the rest of the installation. Plywood sheets must be flush and level on the front surface to which the single panels will be attached. Use a pencil, pen, or tape to mark the center point of this wall. Now mark the center point of the plywood piece. Line up the marked center point on the plywood to the marked center point on the wall. Use the endpoints you marked on the wall earlier. Once lined up, make another mark on the wall at the halfway point of the plywood sheet. This will help us line up the plywood when we place the 2x4 underneath it. Use a stud finder to locate the studs that will be used to anchor the plywood panels. Anchor the plywood sheets to the studs using the supplied hardware. Use roughly 6 screws per stud. We recommend painting all 4 sides of the plywood the same color of the wall it's being installed on. This way it blends in with the wall for a clean looking finished installation. Paint the edges and at least 2 inches inward on the front of the plywood on all 4 sides. Let the paint dry fully before installing the panels. Cut the strapping and remove the lids of both boxes. Place the styrofoam on the floor and off to the side of the plywood sheet. Then cut open the plastic wrapping and place the panel on the styrofoam so that each panel is facing up. Now open the rectangular box. It contains 1 CPU with a power cord, 1 box for the tablet stand, 1 CPU install template, a variety of tools for the installation, 1 Air-X pad, 3 noodles, 1 air-filled medicine ball, 2 hurdles, and audio tubes. The top panel includes the display board and 5 targets, and is installed above the bottom panel, which includes just 4 targets. But before we begin, remove the tape on the top panel shown here. We will start by removing the polycarbonate covers from each of the panels. You can use either the hex screwdriver or a hex drill bit to remove all 24 screws on each edge of the panel cover. Remove the front polycarbonate covers from each of the panels and place them in a safe place to keep them from being scratched. Grab one of the cardboard boxes we removed the panels from earlier. Use a knife to cut 4 inches from one side of the top and bottom cardboard pieces. Connect those 2 pieces together as shown here and line it up with the bottom of the plywood. Measure and mark 1/2 inch from the edge of both ends of the plywood. Locate the bottom panel. It will only have 4 targets on it. Place the bottom panel on the cardboard pieces and line it up with the 1/2 inch mark you just made. Check that it is flush and level on each side of the panel before installing it. Use a 1/8 inch drill bit with an extension to pre-drill all 6 hole locations. Use the provided wood screws to secure the panel. Before you complete the bottom 2 holes, remove the cardboard box we used as a base. It is important that you remove the tape from behind the top panel. You will have trouble removing this wire if the top panels are secured onto the wall. Place the top panel onto the bottom panel so that both pins lock into place. Check that it is flush and level on each side of the panel. Again, use a 1/8 inch drill bit to pre-drill each hole. Use the provided wood screws to secure the panel. Use a vacuum to clean out any wood debris from the insulation. Locate the target wire from the bottom panel and feed it through the connecting space. Connect it to the wire coming from the top panel. Use a tape measure and mark 72 inches from the floor and 12 inches away from the side of the panel frame. Locate the CPU template. You'll notice that it is 10 inches from the top and bottom. That means the bottom of the CPU template will sit at 62 inches from the floor. Use a tape measure to mark the height from the floor while staying in line with the 12-inch mark from the side of the panel we made earlier. Line up the CPU template with those two marks you've just made while using the level at the top of the template to make sure it is straight. Use a power drill and drill bit to drill into the marked holes labeled CPU. Use a larger size drill bit to increase the size of each hole. This will allow us to use the wall anchor. Tighten the screw and secure the wall anchor. Then loosen each screw from the wall anchor. Line up the CPU holes to the wall anchors and secure it onto the wall. Locate the unraveled target wire from the top panel and lasso it around the corner of the frame so you can plug it into the CPU. Plug the power cord into the wall outlet and CPU. Turn on the system. Use your mobile device to connect to the system and play the game category Knock the Lights Out, Keep 3 On. Test the target sensors by striking out all targets. Keep in mind, you are touching the sensors below or above each target and not the target screens themselves. Once tested, turn the system off. Clean the back of the bottom panel cover and reattach it to the bottom panel using a hex screwdriver. Do not fully tighten the screws at this time. Repeat the same process for the top panel cover. If you are doing it alone, make sure to keep pressure toward the bottom middle of the cover panel while you screw one screw on each side of the panel cover. You can release your arm pressure from the middle of the system and continue to secure the remaining screws. Again, do not fully tighten the screws at this time. If you decide to use a drill to fully tighten the screws, make sure the drill power level is set low enough so that your thumb and pointer finger can resist the torque. Apply constant direct pressure toward the center of the cover while your free hand tightens the screws. We recommend that you tighten all 3 corner screws first, then both screws at the center of each side of the panel. This will eliminate the chance of air bubbles forming under the panel covers. Follow the same process for the top panel cover. Turn on the system. Use your mobile device to connect to the system and play the game category Knock the Lights Out, Keep 3 On. Test the target sensors by striking out all targets. Once tested, turn the system off. Installing the conduit. Prepare the conduit pieces, a PVC cutter, and grab a measuring tape. Measure the distance from the middle of the top of the panel to 1/2 inch past the plywood. You should get a measurement of 29 inches. Measure the distance from the top of the plywood to the middle of the CPU. You should get a measurement of 25 inches. Measure 1 inch away from the middle of the CPU to the plywood. You should get a measurement of 9 inches. Cut each conduit piece to match these measurements. You will attach an L junction connecting the 29-inch and 25-inch conduit pieces. Attach the T junction to connect the 25-inch and 9-inch conduit piece. Line up the conduit you just cut, then undo the cover tape and stick it in place. Open the conduit pieces and place the target wire through them, then close the conduit. The remaining target wires should be fed in through the top of the panel so there is no extra wire hanging out of the top panel. Attach the piece of conduit while feeding both wires through it. Then attach the T-junction. Undo the cover tape and stick it in place. Use the remaining conduit pieces to tidy up the remaining power cord. Measure the distance between the bottom of the station and the secured conduit pieces we attached earlier. This space required a 62-inch conduit piece. Measure the distance between the bottom middle space of the system and your nearest wall outlet. In this video, we needed a 27.5-inch conduit piece. We placed the power bank at the end of this conduit piece. And finally, measure and cut any necessary conduit pieces to tidy up the remaining wire. We used one more 7-inch conduit piece for the final space. Finally, clean the panel covers with Windex and a rag. Congratulations, you are now complete with the installation.